A friend recently asked me, why do you hate Trump so much? And while I was explaining it to her, it occurred to me, or I realized that a lot of people don't know his history, and they don't really pay that much attention to what's going on. So I thought it was worth taking a minute to go over a few of the reasons. Certainly can't give you an exhaustive list. Now, just to get things out of the way, a lot of people think that it's a personal thing. It's something about his style, or I just don't like that he's crass, or some bullshit like this. I do not give a fuck about any of that stuff. He can express himself however he likes. The things that he says are often bad, but how he says them does not move the needle for me one bit. Now, just going back into his past, and I'm going to intentionally avoid talking about racism and sexism. Although if you don't know what the Central Park Five is, Google it. He has a rich history on both of these topics. But let's just look at his claim to fame. One of his biggest accomplishments as a real estate developer is that in the 90s, he lost almost $1 billion of other people's money. He got investors to put almost $1 billion into a project and lost it all. Since then, he's been carrying forward that loss. That means that the IRS let him use that loss to offset his taxes in future years, which means that for many of those years, he probably was paying less than you. And I don't mean proportionally less, I mean potentially in dollar amounts less. Now, he may exaggerate how much money he has, but he is doing this and paying less, certainly proportionally, but definitely not paying his fair share. This is one reason he doesn't want to release his taxes, because he doesn't want you to see how little money he actually has and how little he's actually paying. So that's one thing. Now, while he was working on these projects, he had a bunch of small businesses. And again, look into this. I'm not, don't take my word for it. He had a bunch of small businesses work for him. And after they did the work, often spending a year or two, and their small business was completely dedicated to his project, he told them when the bill was due, I'm not going to pay that, or I'm going to pay half. And oh, you don't like it? Sue me, because it's going to take you more time and cost you more money to sue me than what you will get from the suit. So it won't be worth it for you. Now, these are small businesses. These are not like Chase, where they can absorb a few $100,000 hit. These are businesses where that kind of money destroys them or really hurts them. So this is a major problem for me, just in terms of business ethics. Not an acceptable thing. Now, in terms of what he's doing as president, and again, I can't give you an exhaustive list because every week there's so much stuff that by the end of the week, you forget. People like me who pay attention forget what happened at the beginning of the week because there are so many new things. But just to give you some examples, and again, I'm going to intentionally avoid things like the Muslim ban, which is un-American, honestly. But ignoring that, he put Scott Pruitt in charge of the EPA, our Environmental Protection Agency. Now, if you don't know who Scott Pruitt is, this is a man who spent his career fighting for the oil companies to let them pollute. This is a man who is now running the EPA and tearing down regulations. And I understand there's this idea that regulations are automatically bad. And sometimes there are things that need to be made more efficient. But regulations in general, a friend and fellow candidate Deidre Aboud said, where there's a rule, there's a reason. And the reason behind many of these rules is that somebody was doing something horrible. Somebody was polluting, somebody was doing stuff that was unthinkable, and we had to do something about it. We had to stop them because they were poisoning people. Scott Pruitt is tearing down those rules. And again, I always like to say this, but it's not the environment, it's our environment. We all breathe the air. We all drink the water. We are being poisoned. If you have kids, they are being poisoned. And Pruitt is helping that. He put Ajit Pai in charge of the FCC. Now, the FCC is meant to protect public resources, the broadcasting bandwidth that we have. And Ajit Pai has done a couple of things. Well, he's done many things, but two big ones that really bother me. He's ended net neutrality, despite the vast majority of Americans not wanting him to do that. And it's significant that he's formerly an attorney for Verizon. He works more for them than for us, despite the fact that we pay him. Another thing that he's done is allow corporations, individual corporations, to have an outsized ownership stake in local broadcasting. Now, why is that significant? What does that even mean, Scott? Well, there are rules in place, or there have been, that limit access. They keep companies from owning too much of a specific broadcasting area. And the reason for this is simple. They don't want one company or one individual to have so much power that they can control everything that you see and hear on TV or in the radio. He has broken this rule, and he's given a company called Sinclair, who, again, if you've not heard of them, Google them, plenty on them. But they're one of these insidious things where they actually control an increasing amount of the local news that we see. If you watch local news, a lot of the packages that you're seeing probably come from them, and they're basically a propaganda network. They're a pretty horrible thing. You might not be aware of their existence, but this is something that Pai is doing. And Pai, again, appointed by Trump. You can go up and down the list. Look up Betsy DeVos. She's in charge of our Department of Education. Look, and even the best cases, the cases where somebody is not intrinsically just an anathema to whatever they're in charge of, like Rick Perry is running our Department of Energy. This is somebody who is summarily unqualified, both as an executive and the Department of Energy, if you don't know what they do, mostly oversees our nuclear stockpile. And these are people who often the person in charge is a nuclear physicist. If you do not know anything about Rick Perry, I assure you this, he is no nuclear physicist. He has a degree in agriculture. And I mean, no offense to people with a degree in agriculture. There are certainly ones who know things outside of their domain. Rick Perry is not such a person. And again, just go up and down the list. I can't even exhaustively go through the list because there are so many people and so many horrible things going on. Every day, there's something terrible going on. And the worst thing about these things is that most of these are things that none of us hear about. I pay attention, and I barely hear about some of this stuff. If you don't pay attention, all of this stuff is going on, and it's going to affect us. The thing that's terrible about it also is that a lot of it is not going to really be something that you'll feel for years. And then when you feel it, you'll be like, well, why is the air terrible again? Why are my kids getting poisoned? And that'll be years later. You won't really see the proximal cause of it. You won't know who has done these things to you. So please look into all of this stuff. I assure you that I do not dislike Trump for irrational reasons. And just to end this, I want to say, I've had people tell me, well, Scott, you dislike Trump. We disliked Obama. Well, yes, you disliked Obama, and you might even have felt as strongly about that as I feel about Trump. But the difference is that there is no rational reason to have disliked Obama. You might disagree with him politically. I will give you that that's an option. But when you actually look at everything that he said, everything he did, it's just not a comparison. This is night and day. And frankly, I find it incredibly offensive that you would try to make this equivalence. It either implies that you are wildly ignorant or that you know better and you are intentionally distorting facts. And I sincerely hope that it's the former, because the former can be changed. You can learn. If it's the latter, then there's something fundamentally morally and ethically wrong with you. Thank you very much.